Technology is the future, Gavin declared, raising his champagne flute at my farewell lunch. His polished smile never reached his eyes as he continued. With our new automated systems and AI integration, Northrise Apparel will be positioned to dominate the market for decades to come. He turned to me with that practiced sincerity they teach in executive coaching seminars. Let's give Vida a round of applause for getting us here. The conference room erupted in obligatory clapping. I nodded, smiled, and thanked them, clutching my small black notebook, the only personal item I'd brought with me from my office, after packing 25 years of memories into 3 cardboard boxes yesterday. My name is Vida Lewis. For a quarter century, I've been the backbone of Northrise Apparel's entire data infrastructure in Sacramento. When I started, I was plugging in physical servers and writing code that formed the foundation of what would become a billion-dollar company. They didn't call me a data architect back then. I was just the computer lady who somehow made everything work. Vida has been with us since the beginning, Gavin continued, his voice carrying the enthusiastic cadence of someone who had joined the company a mere 14 months ago. She's seen us grow from a small regional distributor into the industry leader we are today. We wish her all the best in her retirement. Retirement. The word stung. I was only 59, and I hadn't chosen to leave. The decision had been presented to me as a fait accompli 3 weeks ago. The Nexus system will streamline our operations, Gavin had explained, leaning back in his ergonomic chair, referring to the new AI management system they'd purchased for what I later learned was $17 million. Your position is unfortunately redundant under the new infrastructure. All around me now, former colleagues averted their eyes, knowing what this farewell lunch really was. The ceremonial removal of an obsolete part. After decades of building their empire's nervous system, designing their inventory tracking, creating their customer database, programming their shipment logistics, I was being discarded because I didn't fit the sleek new aesthetic of Silicon Valley-inspired corporate modernization. I felt the weight of my notebook in my hand. Inside were 25 years of institutional knowledge, the backdoor fixes for emergencies, the manual override codes, the peculiarities of our custom-built system that no instruction manual covered. Information that wasn't stored in any cloud or server, only in my head and in these pages. To Vida, Gavin concluded, and to the future of Northrise Apparel. I raised my glass in response, hiding my thoughts behind a practiced smile. Little did they know, their future was about to get very complicated. I bought my house in Midtown Sacramento in 1998, when the company was still called West Coast Threads, operating out of a converted warehouse with 23 employees. Now, Northrise Apparel had over 7,000 staff across the country, and my modest 2-bedroom craftsman had appreciated to the point where I could sell it and retire comfortably if I wanted. But retirement wasn't in my plans. The evening after my farewell lunch, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset and thinking back on how I'd become the company's foundation without anyone fully realizing it. When Thomas Green first hired me, fresh out of a computer science program where I was one of 4 women in my class, he valued my methodical approach. You think of things the rest of us don't, he'd said. I need someone who sees the big picture. And I had. As West Coast Threads became Green Apparel, and finally Northrise, I designed systems that anticipated our growth. I built redundancies, created emergency protocols, standardized our data collection. When we acquired smaller companies, I integrated their systems with ours, preserving what worked while upgrading what didn't. Everything changed when Thomas retired 3 years ago. The board brought in Gavin Pollard, 38 years old with an MBA from Wharton and a resume full of tech startups, but no experience in apparel manufacturing or distribution. His first all-hands meeting set the tone. We need to disrupt ourselves before someone else disrupts us. Over the next year, consultants from Elstone Trading came and went, using phrases like digital transformation and AI-first paradigm. They interviewed me extensively, taking notes on how our systems functioned, what databases contained which information, how our proprietary software managed inventory across 5 distribution centers. I should have seen it coming, but loyalty had made me naive. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Eleanor from HR holding a basket. "Just wanted to check on you," she said when I opened the door. "The transition team realized we never got your authentication codes for the backup systems." The transition team being the 3 20-somethings tasked with deconstructing my life's work. "Everything's in the handover documents," I replied coolly. "The master list should have all the access protocols." Eleanor's smile faltered. "There seems to be some confusion about the legacy systems, particularly the warehouse automation interfaces." Of course there was. Those interfaces were custom-built, modified over years to work with our specific needs. Nothing about them was standard. "I'm sure they'll figure it out," I said, accepting the gift basket, but not inviting her in. The Nexus system is the future, after all. The first signs of trouble came a week after my departure. My former colleague Jerome texted me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Systems glitching. New team can't figure out why the inventory won't reconcile with the shipping manifests." I didn't respond. The next day, Bethany from accounting called. "Vita, we're having some issues with the quarterly reporting module. The numbers aren't matching what we're seeing in sales." "I'm sure the transition team can handle it," I replied. "The Nexus system is supposed to be state-of-the-art." "But it's still pulling from your database architecture," she pressed. "Nobody understands the connections like you do." I felt a twinge of sympathy for Bethany, who had always been kind to me, but I remained firm. "I've moved on, Bethany. My consulting schedule is already full." This wasn't a lie. The day after my severance package had cleared, I'd received a call from Philip Donovan, co-founder of Donovan and Mills Logistics. They were Northrise's biggest competitor in the West Coast apparel distribution space, and they wanted to meet. "Just a consultation," Philip had said. "We've admired your work for years." The office of Donovan and Mills occupied the 12th floor of a glass tower downtown, with a view of the state capitol. It was sleeker than Northrise's converted industrial campus, filled with natural light and modern furniture. Philip met me in the lobby himself, a courtesy Gavin had never extended to anyone below VP level. "Ms. Lewis," he said, shaking my hand. "Thank you for coming. We're excited to hear your thoughts on our data infrastructure." The meeting lasted 3 hours. I was introduced to their tech team, shown their systems, asked my opinions on their processes. They listened carefully, took notes, asked intelligent questions. "We've been trying to solve our multi-location inventory synchronization for months," their lead developer admitted. "Our current system can't handle the complexity." The problem was immediately clear to me. I'd solved it for Northrise 15 years ago. At the end of the meeting, Philip walked me to the elevator. "We'd like to bring you on as a consultant," he said. 3 days a week, your own team, complete autonomy on how you approach the rebuild." The offer was double my previous salary. "I'll need to think about it," I said, though my mind was already made up. When I got home, there were 3 missed calls from Northrise. One from Eleanor, one from the IT department, and one from Gavin himself. I ignored them all. That night, I opened my black notebook and began transcribing its contents into a password-protected document on my personal laptop. Emergency workarounds, server peculiarities, the architectural quirks of a system built over decades, rather than designed all at once. Knowledge that wasn't documented anywhere else. The next morning, I called Philip and accepted his offer. That afternoon, Jerome texted again. "Complete system failure. Nothing's talking to anything. CEO is losing his mind." I closed my phone without replying and began packing for my first day at Donovan and Mills. I was deep into my 3rd week at Donovan and Mills when the storm truly broke. I'd been given a corner office overlooking the American River and a team of 5 developers who actually listened when I talked about database architecture. We were making rapid progress on rebuilding their inventory management system, and I felt more valued in those 3 weeks than I had in my last 3 years at Northrise. My phone buzzed with a text from Jerome. They're calling it the Black Thursday crash. Nothing's working. Orders lost. Inventory frozen. Customer portal down. Gavin's looking for someone to blame. I didn't respond, but I did pull up the local business news on my computer. There it was, a headline on the Sacramento Business Journal website. Northrise Apparel faces major system outage. Stock drops 8% on fulfillment concerns. The article described how Northrise's much-touted new AI system had failed spectacularly, leaving customers unable to place orders and warehouses unable to ship existing ones. The company had issued a statement about temporary technical difficulties. But sources inside the company, Jerome, I suspected, described a complete system collapse. My office phone rang. Philip Donovan's name appeared on the caller ID. "I assume you've seen the news about your former employer," he said when I answered. "Just reading it now," I replied. "Any insights you'd care to share?" His tone was carefully neutral. I considered my response. Their new system was implemented without adequate testing or understanding of the existing architecture. It was inevitable. "I see." Philip paused. "We've received an interesting call from a Thomas Green. Apparently, he still sits on Northrise's board, and he suggested we might have recently acquired some valuable expertise that could help resolve their situation." My heart skipped. Thomas had been my champion for decades, but I never expected him to reach out like this. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That we're quite happy with our recent personnel decisions and have no interest in loaning out our valuable consultants." I smiled despite myself. "Thank you. Though I admit to some curiosity," he continued. "Just how bad is their situation?" I sighed, weighing my professional ethics against my lingering resentment. If they tried to integrate Nexus without properly migrating the manufacturing execution system I designed, they've likely corrupted their entire database. Every order, inventory record, and shipping manifest from the last 3 months could be affected. And recovery? Possible, but not with their current team. They don't understand how the legacy systems interact with the newer components. We were interrupted by my assistant, who appeared at my door with an urgent expression. "Ms. Lewis, there's a Gavin Pollard on line 2. He's called 3 times in the last hour." I thanked her, but made no move toward the phone. Philip raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you going to take that?" "I don't work for Northrise anymore," I replied simply. He nodded slowly, a small smile forming. "No, you certainly don't." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "We have that strategy meeting at 3. I'd be interested in your thoughts on expanding our direct-to-consumer channels." After he left, I sat staring at the blinking light on my phone for a long moment before turning back to my work. By that evening, my email contained increasingly desperate messages from various Northrise executives. The most revealing came from Eleanor. "The transition team has admitted they don't understand how to restore from your backup protocols. Gavin is talking about bringing in external consultants at $30,000 a day. Please call me." I closed my laptop and went home, sleeping better than I had in years. The next morning brought news that Northrise's stock had fallen another 6%. A financial analyst on the local business report speculated that extended fulfillment issues could cost the company upwards of $50 million if not resolved quickly, with long-term damage to customer relationships that could be incalculable. When I arrived at Donovan and Mills, I found an elaborate fruit basket on my desk, with a note from Philip. "Thank you for your loyalty. Your insights yesterday helped us secure the Wilson account, 4.2 Northern annual." The Wilson Group had been one of Northrise's oldest clients. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction before getting back to work. Around noon, my desk phone rang again. The receptionist sounded apologetic. "Ms. Lewis, there's a Gavin Pollard in the lobby insisting on seeing you. He doesn't have an appointment." I took a deep breath. "Tell him I'm in meetings all day. He says he'll wait." After consulting with Philip, who seemed amused by the situation, I agreed to a 15-minute meeting in one of the first-floor conference rooms, neutral territory. Gavin looked terrible. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes and a coffee stain on his shirt. "Vida," he said, reaching to shake my hand. I nodded but didn't reciprocate. "Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Gavin?" I kept my tone professional, betraying none of the satisfaction I felt seeing him so undone. "We need your help," he said simply. "The Nexus integration has encountered some complications." I believe catastrophic failure is the term the business papers are using. He winced. "The coverage has been unfortunate, but we believe with your expertise, we can resolve the issues quickly. The board has authorized me to offer you a 6-month consulting contract. Very generous terms. I have a position here. We'll double whatever they're paying you," he said quickly. Then, seeing my expression, "Triple it." I leaned back, studying him. "You fired me, Gavin. You called my expertise obsolete. You said, what was it? That technology is the future, and my methods were holding the company back." He had the decency to look embarrassed. "That was a mistake. We all make mistakes. Some more costly than others. Vida, please. We're losing millions every day. The warehouses can't ship. Customer service can't access order histories. The Nexus team says the core database is corrupted beyond recognition." I thought of all the warnings I'd given during the transition, the documentation I'd provided that had been dismissed as unnecessarily complex, the training sessions no one had time to attend. "No," I said simply. "What?" "No, I don't work for Northrise anymore. I have commitments here, but I'm sure your Nexus experts will figure it out eventually." Gavin's desperation turned to anger. "You know exactly what happened to our systems. You probably built in these failures." I stood up, my own anger flaring. "I dedicated 25 years to building robust, reliable systems that kept your company running without fail. If they're failing now, it's because you dismantled them without understanding how they worked." "We'll sue," he threatened. "For sabotage." "For what? For taking another job after being fired? For not documenting every single aspect of systems I built over 25 years? Sue me for not answering phone calls from a company that discarded me?" I gathered my papers. "I believe our 15 minutes are up." As I walked out, I turned back briefly. "By the way, there's a complete recovery protocol in the Emergency Procedures Manual, Volume 3, Section 8. I updated it every quarter for 20 years. But of course, that would require actually reading the documentation." I left him there, mouth slightly open, and returned to my new office, where I was building something better. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from Northrise's legal department requesting all documentation, notes, and intellectual property related to my former position. It was followed by a personal note from Thomas Green. "Vida, call me. We need to talk. The board is in chaos." I decided to respond to Thomas out of respect for our history. He answered on the first ring. "This is a mess," he said without preamble. "Gavin has the board convinced you sabotaged the system." "That's absurd," I replied. "I built those systems to withstand anything. They were working perfectly when I left." "I know that," Thomas sighed. "But they need someone to blame. The Nexus implementation has been a disaster. They've lost millions in orders, and their main backup was corrupted during the migration." "There's a tertiary backup," I said. "On the secure server in Building C. It runs independently from the main system and archives everything weekly." There was a pause. Building C was decommissioned last month. Cost-cutting measure. I closed my eyes, imagining the old server room with its carefully maintained equipment, now empty. Of course it was. "Vida," Thomas's voice softened. "I know you were treated poorly, but there are 7,000 employees whose livelihoods depend on Northrise. Not all of them were part of Gavin's decisions." It was a fair point, and one that had been weighing on me. My grievance was with the executive team, not with the warehouse workers or customer service representatives who were probably dealing with chaos. I can't come back, Thomas. I've made commitments here. I understand. But perhaps there's a middle way. What if you provided consultation remotely? Just enough guidance to get the critical systems back online. The board would ensure you're well compensated, and Gavin would have no direct contact with you. I considered his proposal. I'll think about it. That evening, I discussed the situation with Philip, who surprised me with his response. Help them, he said, under the right conditions. You want me to help our biggest competitor? He smiled. I want you to negotiate terms that benefit us both. If you can get their systems running again while securing favorable terms for Donovan and Mills, that's a win-win. The next day I called Thomas with my conditions. I would provide remote consultation only, working exclusively through their technical team. I would require a substantial consulting fee, paid in advance. And most importantly, Northrise would need to sign a partnership agreement with Donovan and Mills, giving us preferred status for West Coast distribution. That's essentially asking us to collaborate with our competitor, Thomas said. It's asking you to acknowledge reality, I countered. Northrise's distribution network is in shambles. You need reliable partners until you're back on your feet. Donovan and Mills can handle the overflow at fair rates, and I can help restore your systems. Everyone wins. Thomas took my terms to the board, who spent 8 hours in emergency session before agreeing. Gavin was reportedly furious, but overruled. The next week was intense. Working remotely through video conferences, I guided Northrise's technical team through the painstaking process of recovering their data and rebuilding critical systems. I didn't give them everything, just enough to restore basic functionality and prevent further losses. Philip was delighted with the partnership agreement, which gave us access to clients we'd been pursuing for years. Northrise's stock stabilized, and the crisis coverage in the business press began to fade. Through it all, I maintained my distance from Gavin, speaking only with the technical team and Thomas. But I heard through Jerome that Gavin's position was precarious, with several board members openly questioning his leadership. It wasn't revenge exactly. It was something more satisfying: vindication. 6 weeks after what the tech team had begun calling the Vita protocols salvaged Northrise's systems, I received an unexpected email from Thomas Green. The subject line read simply, Board meeting results. Gavin Pollard had been removed as CEO. The board had voted 10-2 for his immediate replacement. The Nexus failure cost us $142 million in lost orders, damaged customer relationships, and emergency consultants, Thomas wrote. His position became untenable when the quarterly reports showed the extent of the damage. I thought you should hear it from me first. I sat back in my chair, letting the news sink in. I hadn't actively worked for Gavin's downfall, but I couldn't pretend to feel sorry about it. His arrogance had nearly destroyed a company that thousands of people depended on for their livelihoods. Later that day, Philip stopped by my office. I hear Northrise is looking for a new CEO, he said with a knowing smile. So I've heard. They could do worse than to bring Thomas back temporarily. I nodded. He understands the business in a way Gavin never did. Speaking of understanding the business, Philip continued, the Wilson account was so impressed with our handling of their overflow that they've asked about making the arrangement permanent. That would be a $12 million annual contract, taken directly from Northrise, I observed. Philip shrugged. Business is business. And speaking of business, the executive committee is meeting tomorrow to discuss our 5-year strategic plan. I'd like you to present your vision for our data architecture. My vision? You've completely transformed our systems in just 2 months, Vita. The committee needs to understand what you've built and where you see it going. Your work deserves recognition. As he left, I turned to look out my window at the Sacramento skyline. In the distance, I could just make out the Northrise campus. Their logo still illuminated the main building, but inside, everything had changed. The company would survive, but it would never be the same. Neither would I. For the first time in decades, I was building something on my terms, with people who valued what I brought to the table. 3 months later, I attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Donovan and Mills's new technology center. My name was on the plaque beside the entrance. Vida Lewis Technology Center, where innovation meets experience. Philip had insisted on naming it after me when my system overhaul resulted in a 38% efficiency improvement across their distribution network. The center would house an expanded development team and serve as a training facility for technical staff from across the company. "We didn't just hire a consultant," Philip said in his speech. "We gained a visionary who understood that technology should serve people, not replace them." As I stood beside him for the ceremonial photo, I thought about how differently things had turned out from what I'd expected when I left Northrise. I hadn't planned revenge exactly, just a new beginning. But my success had become a form of vindication, more powerful than any deliberate retaliation could have been. The reception afterward was attended by local business leaders and politicians. I found myself approached by a woman I didn't recognize. "Ms. Lewis, I'm Diane Torres, from the Governor's Office of Business Development. I've been hearing remarkable things about your work." We spoke for nearly half an hour about data systems and their impact on regional businesses. At the end of our conversation, she handed me her card. "We're forming a task force on technology infrastructure for state agencies. We need people with both expertise and perspective. Would you be interested in serving as an advisor?" 6 months ago, I had been deemed obsolete by a man half my age. Now I was being recruited to help shape technology policy for the entire state. "I'd be honored," I replied, taking her card. As the reception wound down, I received a text from Jerome. "New CEO announced. You'll never guess who." Thomas Green was coming out of retirement to lead Northrise through its recovery. I smiled and put away my phone without responding. That chapter of my life was closed. My focus now was on building something new. As I looked around at the center bearing my name, filled with people who valued my contributions, I realized that the best revenge wasn't about destruction at all. It was about creation.